Welcome to the channel Reveal Penny USA. Imagine reaching into an old jar of coins, finding an ordinary-looking 1974 Lincoln penny, and having absolutely no idea that the tiny piece of copper in your hand could be connected to a fortune worth millions. The 1974 Lincoln penny may look like nothing more than pocket change, but this is exactly where the world of rare coins becomes fascinating, because the biggest surprises are often hiding behind coins that millions of people have handled without a second thought. And today, we are taking a deep look at the incredible possibility of a 1974 Lincoln penny being worth as much as $22 million in an extraordinary hypothetical collector scenario. But before you decide that every 1974 penny is suddenly worth a fortune, stay with me, because the real story is about condition, rarity, minting characteristics, varieties, errors, provenance, and the tiny details that can transform an ordinary-looking cent into something collectors desperately want. And believe me, the 1974 penny is only the beginning, because later in this video we are going to move into another Lincoln cent from a completely different era, and then another one that could make the first discovery look almost unbelievable. I will not reveal those values yet, but you definitely want to stay until we reach them. The year 1974 was an extraordinary period in American history, and the Lincoln cent produced during that era carries more than just Abraham Lincoln's portrait. It carries a story of changing metal prices, massive coin production, economic uncertainty, and a United States mint dealing with enormous demand for everyday money. On the front of the coin, you see the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln, facing right, with liberty and the date positioned around him, while the familiar motto "In God We Trust" stretches across the top. Turn the coin over and you find the Lincoln Memorial, surrounded by United States of America, E pluribus unum, and the denomination 1 cent. To most people, that design is completely ordinary, but to a serious collector, every detail matters. The exact mint mark, the sharpness of the strike, the surface preservation, the color designation, the presence of unusual doubling, cracks, clips, die characteristics, or other minting anomalies can change the story completely. And this is where our $22 million discussion needs an important reality check. There is no broadly established public auction record proving that a normal 1974 Lincoln penny sold for $22 million. A figure that high should be treated as a sensational hypothetical or claimed valuation rather than a confirmed market price. In the real numismatic world, values depend on authentication, rarity, grade, demand, and documented sales. That distinction is incredibly important, because the goal here is not to tell you that every 1974 penny is secretly worth millions. The goal is to teach you why a particular coin can become extraordinary while another coin from the exact same year can remain worth only a small amount. Imagine two 1974 Lincoln pennies sitting side by side on a table. At first glance, they look almost identical. Same portrait, same year, same basic design. But now imagine that one has been circulating for decades, scratched by other coins, exposed to moisture, rubbed by fingers, and darkened with age, while the other has been preserved with nearly flawless surfaces, brilliant original color, and a remarkable minting characteristic that makes it unusual. Suddenly, they are no longer equal. This is the secret that beginners often miss. Rarity is not simply about age. A coin does not automatically become valuable because it is old, and a common coin does not automatically become rare because someone says it is. Serious collectors want evidence. They want a coin that can be identified, compared, authenticated, and supported by a strong market history. That is why the first thing you should do when examining a 1974 Lincoln penny is slow down. Do not clean it. Do not polish it. Do not scratch it. Do not attempt to make it shiny. Cleaning a potentially valuable coin can permanently damage its surfaces and actually reduce its desirability. Instead, hold the coin carefully by its edges, preferably under good lighting, and inspect both sides with patience. Start with the date. Is it clearly 1974? Next, look beneath the date for a mint mark. Depending on the specific issue, you may encounter a Philadelphia coin without a mint mark, a Denver issue carrying AD, or a San Francisco issue carrying an S, particularly in proof production. That tiny letter can completely change which variety you are dealing with. Then examine Lincoln's portrait. Look closely at the hair, cheek, jawline, ear, and lettering. Are there unusual lines? Does any letter appear doubled? Are there strange raised areas that look different from normal wear? But be careful, not every strange-looking feature is an error. Coins are full of mechanical marks, scratches, machine doubling, die deterioration, and post-mint damage that can fool inexperienced eyes. This is why authentication matters. A genuine double die, for example, is fundamentally different from damage that merely creates the appearance of doubling. A true mint error occurs during production, while damage can happen years or decades later. That distinction can be the difference between an interesting coin and a potentially important collectible. Now imagine a collector opening a box of old cents purchased from an estate. Most coins are ordinary. A few are slightly better. Then, suddenly, one 1974 cent catches the light differently. The collector turns it over, examines the date, checks the mint mark, and notices something unusual around the lettering. The heart starts beating faster. Is it real? Is it just damage? Could this be an unusual die variety? This is exactly the kind of moment that keeps numismatists searching through old collections. The thrill isn't simply about money, it is about discovery. Somewhere between ordinary pocket change and the world's most famous rarities is an enormous universe of coins with stories waiting to be uncovered. And that is why the 1974 Lincoln penny remains interesting even though enormous numbers were produced. The coin's historical setting also makes it fascinating. The early 1970s brought inflation, rising commodity prices, and increasing pressure on the traditional composition of United States coinage. Copper prices became a serious concern, and the government explored alternatives to traditional bronze cents. This period eventually led to experiments involving different compositions, including the famous 1974 aluminum cent experiment. That historical background is important because it demonstrates just how complicated the story of the 1974 cent really is. The United States Mint was not operating in a vacuum. It was responding to economic pressures and trying to determine how everyday coins could continue to be produced economically. The 1974 aluminum cent story itself has become one of the most fascinating chapters in American numismatics, although genuine examples are extraordinarily complicated from a legal, historical, and authentication perspective. And this is another reason you should never assume that an unusual-looking 1974 cent is automatically a treasure. Some pieces associated with famous experiments have been heavily discussed by collectors, while others can be replicas, altered pieces, or misidentified coins. The farther a coin moves from a normal production issue, the more important professional authentication becomes. Now let's talk about condition, because this is where an ordinary penny can separate itself from thousands of others. Imagine finding a 1974 cent that has spent 50 years untouched in a protected collection. The surfaces remain clean and original, the details are exceptionally sharp, the color is attractive, and there are almost no distracting marks. Compare that to a circulated example that has scratches, dents, stains, and heavy wear. Even if both coins started life at the same mint on the same year, the collector appeal can be dramatically different. Professional grading companies evaluate coins according to established standards, and high grades can make desirable issues much more valuable. For copper-based Lincoln cents, color designation can also matter, because collectors distinguish between red, red-brown, and brown appearances depending on how much original red color remains. A brilliant red example with exceptional preservation can attract far more attention than a heavily circulated brown example, assuming all other factors are equal. But again, this is where hype can become dangerous. You may see a photograph online claiming that a normal 1974 penny is worth millions, but a photograph alone does not prove rarity, and an asking price is not the same thing as a completed sale. Auction results, certified grades, population reports, and authentication provide much stronger evidence. If you discover something genuinely unusual, the smart move is to document it carefully and seek an opinion from a reputable numismatist or professional grading service rather than immediately believing an extraordinary valuation. And here is the part that makes searching through old coins so exciting: you don't need to be an expert to start. You simply need patience. Maybe you inherited a jar from a family member. Maybe there is an old coin album sitting in a drawer. Maybe you have a collection purchased years ago that you haven't examined closely. Most people look at pennies for less than a second before tossing them into a container. A collector looks longer. A collector asks questions. What mint made it? What condition is it in? Is the date correct? Is the mint mark genuine? Does the design show a known variety? Is there evidence of a genuine mint error? Could the coin have been struck on an unusual planchet? Is there documentation proving where it came from? Those questions turn pocket change into a treasure hunt. And remember, the rumored $22 million figure associated with our 1974 Lincoln penny should not be interpreted as a guaranteed price. The real value of any specific coin would have to be established from the coin itself and from credible market evidence. In fact, one of the biggest lessons from rare coin collecting is that the difference between a $1 coin, a $100 coin, a $10,000 coin, and a truly exceptional rarity can be hidden in details so small that you might need magnification to see them. That tiny detail could be a die variety, a dramatic mint error, an unusual composition, or a combination of extreme rarity and extraordinary condition. Imagine finding such a coin at the bottom of an old coffee can. Would you recognize it? Would you accidentally spend it? Would you clean it because you thought the dark color looked ugly? That is exactly why knowledge matters. The collector who understands what to look for has an advantage over someone who simply sees a penny. And now I want you to think about something. If a 1974 penny can become fascinating because of its history, varieties, condition, and unusual production circumstances, what happens when we move forward into another decade and examine a completely different Lincoln cent? That's where things get even more interesting. I am not going to reveal the value of the next coin yet, because the number is not nearly as important as the clues that can lead you toward it. What matters is whether you can recognize the difference between an ordinary cent and an extraordinary one. So before we move forward, take another look around your home. Check those jars. Check those old albums. Check the coins that have been sitting untouched for years. But don't clean them, don't scratch them, and don't assume every unusual mark is an error. Instead, look carefully, take clear photographs, compare reliable references, and when something truly unusual appears, get professional help. The 1974 Lincoln penny is a perfect reminder that a coin story can be much bigger than its face value. A 1-cent denomination can carry decades of American history, technological changes, economic pressure, minting experiments, collector research, and the possibility of discovering something that almost everyone else overlooked. And perhaps that's the greatest attraction of this hobby, the possibility that the next interesting coin isn't locked inside a museum. It could be sitting quietly in an old box, waiting for somebody curious enough to inspect it. So keep your eyes open, because we are not finished yet. The next Lincoln penny on our list comes from another fascinating period, and there are details about that coin that could make you look at your loose change completely differently. I won't reveal its value yet, and that's intentional, because I want you to first understand why collectors might care about it, what clues to look for, and what could separate a normal example from a truly exceptional one. And after that, we have one more Lincoln penny waiting for us, and trust me, you will want to hear the story before you decide that an old penny is just a penny. For now, remember the lesson of 1974, never judge a coin only by its denomination, never confuse an internet claim with a verified auction result, and never underestimate the power of a tiny detail. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary can sometimes be smaller than a grain of sand. So the next time a 1974 Lincoln penny lands in your hand, don't immediately spend it. Look at it. Turn it over. Check the date. Check the mint mark. Study the surfaces. Ask the right questions. Because while most pennies are ordinary, the hunt for the extraordinary is what makes coin collecting so addictive. And if you think this 1974 story is fascinating, just wait until we move to the next coin, because the clues are about to get even more intriguing, and the final coin on our list could be the one that leaves you staring at your own collection wondering what you've been overlooking all along. Next, 1985 Lincoln penny. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be the one that makes you stop everything and look again. The 1985 Lincoln cent appears incredibly ordinary, but some examples can become fascinating collectibles because of condition, varieties, mint errors, and unusual characteristics that separate them from millions of normal pieces. And today, we're exploring the sensational possibility of a 1985 Lincoln penny being associated with a value as high as $25 million in an extraordinary hypothetical scenario. But don't mistake that headline figure for a confirmed auction record, because a normal 1985 Lincoln penny is not automatically worth millions. The real mystery is what kind of exceptional coin could ever command extraordinary attention, and what tiny clues could reveal that you have something unusual in your hands. Stay with me, because by the end of this story you'll know exactly why serious collectors examine coins that most people would instantly ignore, and remember, we still have one more Lincoln penny waiting after this one, and I am saving that story for later because there is a reason the final coin deserves your full attention. The 1985 Lincoln penny belongs to a fascinating chapter in the history of the American 1-cent piece. By this point, the familiar Lincoln Memorial design had already been part of American pocket change for decades, and millions of Americans handled these coins every day without giving them a second thought. The obverse showed Abraham Lincoln, the nation's 16th president, with liberty and "In God We Trust" surrounding the portrait, while the reverse displayed the Lincoln Memorial and the denomination 1 cent. Yet the fact that so many were produced does not mean every surviving coin is identical. This is where coin collecting becomes a game of details. Imagine dumping a handful of old pennies onto a table. They all look similar. You see brown surfaces, small scratches, worn lettering, and dates that blur together. But now imagine taking one coin and placing it under a bright lamp. Suddenly, the details begin to emerge. The edges are examined. The date is checked. The mint mark is inspected. Lincoln's hair and cheek are studied. The lettering is compared with known examples. The reverse is flipped over, and the memorial columns are carefully examined. Suddenly, that ordinary penny becomes a question. What happened to this coin? Was it struck differently? Is there unusual doubling? Is there a die crack? Is the surface damaged from circulation, or did something happen at the mint? That question is the beginning of every serious treasure hunt. And this is exactly why the 1985 Lincoln cent can be interesting. The first thing to understand is that a high value does not come simply from the year. A 1985 penny is not automatically rare just because it is several decades old. In fact, millions of coins from this period remain available. What makes a particular example potentially important is the combination of rarity, condition, variety, error status, and collector demand. This is a crucial distinction, because the internet is full of dramatic claims about ordinary coins supposedly being worth enormous fortunes. Sometimes those claims are based on asking prices rather than actual sales. Sometimes they involve unusual errors that are extremely difficult to authenticate. Sometimes they are simply exaggerated. A smart collector learns to separate the story from the evidence. If somebody tells you a 1985 penny is worth $25 million, the first question should not be, "Where can I sell mine?" The first question should be, "What makes this specific coin different?" That single question can save you from believing unrealistic claims and can also help you recognize a genuinely unusual piece. Start with the mint mark. Depending on the issue, you may encounter a Philadelphia cent without a mint mark or a Denver cent carrying a small d. Proof coins associated with San Francisco may carry an S. That tiny letter can tell you something about the coin's origin and production. Then examine the coin's condition. Has it circulated heavily? Are there scratches across Lincoln's face? Are the fields covered in contact marks? Is the original red color still present? Does the coin appear almost untouched? For collectors, these differences can matter enormously. A coin preserved in exceptional condition can be far more desirable than a heavily worn example, especially when combined with a recognized variety or error. And this is where the 1985 penny becomes a perfect lesson in preservation. Suppose you find an old roll of cents and one 1985 coin looks unusually bright. You might be tempted to polish it. Don't. Never clean a potentially collectible coin simply because you want it to look shiny. Cleaning can leave microscopic scratches, remove original surfaces, and destroy the natural appearance collector's value. A coin that looks dull but has original surfaces may be more desirable than a coin that has been artificially polished to look bright. This is one of the first rules every new collector should learn. Let the coin tell its own story. Now let's talk about errors. This is where the excitement really begins. During the minting process, coins pass through enormous mechanical systems, and although quality control is extensive, unusual production mistakes can occur. A coin might experience a striking problem, a planchet issue, a die-related anomaly, or another minting irregularity. But identifying a true error requires knowledge. A scratch caused by another coin is not a mint error. A dent created after the coin left the mint is not a mint error. A strange-looking area caused by corrosion is not automatically a rare variety. The most desirable errors generally have characteristics that can be explained by the minting process and confirmed through expert examination. Imagine discovering a 1985 cent where a portion of the design appears dramatically displaced. You hold it under the light. You rotate it. You compare it with photographs of normal coins. The excitement rises. But then comes the most important step, verification. Could it be damage? Could it be machine doubling? Could the coin have been altered? Or is it genuinely connected to the striking process? The answer can completely change the coin's importance. This is why professional authentication exists. Collectors aren't just buying shiny metal. They're buying certainty, history, and documented rarity. The more unusual the claim, the more important independent verification becomes. Now imagine a different scenario. You're searching through a family collection that has been sitting in a drawer for 30 years. You find an envelope labeled 1985 cents. Inside are dozens of coins. Most are ordinary. You begin sorting them by mint mark and condition. One coin stands out. It has sharp lettering, unusually clean surfaces, and a strange feature near the date. You take a photograph. You compare it with reference images. You begin researching. Then you notice another detail on the reverse. Suddenly, what started as 5 minutes of curiosity turns into hours of investigation. This is the addictive side of numismatics. You don't know what you'll discover until you look. And sometimes, the discovery itself becomes the reward. The historical background of the 1985 cent also deserves attention. The United States was experiencing major economic and technological changes during the 1980s, and the 1-cent coin remained a crucial part of everyday commerce. The Lincoln Memorial design had become deeply familiar to generations of Americans. Children collected pennies. Families dropped them into jars. Businesses kept them in cash registers. Banks packaged them into rolls. Some coins circulated for years, while others disappeared into collections almost immediately. That difference in their journeys can affect their condition decades later. One 1985 cent might have traveled through thousands of transactions, while another might have remained untouched in a mint set or private collection. That is why two coins from the same year can look dramatically different today. Now think about the concept of population. When collectors evaluate high-grade coins, they want to know how many comparable examples exist at similar grades. A coin may be common in lower grades but much scarcer in exceptional condition. If only a small number of pieces survive with outstanding preservation, collectors can become highly competitive for the best examples. This is one reason condition rarity matters. You might have thousands of 1985 cents available, but far fewer in near-perfect condition. Add a recognized variety, a genuine error, or exceptional provenance, and the situation becomes even more interesting. Provenance is another fascinating element. Imagine a coin that can be traced back through a respected collection, an old estate, or a documented sale. That history doesn't automatically make it valuable, but it can add credibility and context. Collectors love stories. A coin with a documented journey can be more interesting than an identical coin with no history. And this is where imaginative storytelling meets real numismatics. Picture an old wooden desk in a quiet room. A collector opens a drawer and discovers a small envelope that hasn't been touched in decades. Inside is a 1985 Lincoln cent. The collector almost throws it into the ordinary pile. Then something catches the eye. The surface looks unusually clean. The strike appears sharp. A feature near the lettering looks different. The collector reaches for a magnifier. The room becomes silent. 1 minute later, the coin is still in the same hand, but the collector is no longer looking at it as a penny. It has become a puzzle. Could it be significant? Maybe. Could it be nothing? Absolutely. And that uncertainty is what makes the search so exciting. You don't know the answer until the evidence is examined. This is also why viewers should be cautious with viral coin videos and sensational listings. A seller can list a common penny for millions of dollars. That does not mean someone will pay millions for it. A claimed value is not the same as a verified transaction. The strongest evidence comes from reputable auction results, recognized grading services, professional attribution, and documented sales of comparable coins. So when you hear the sensational $25 million figure connected with a 1985 Lincoln penny, think of it as a headline-level hypothetical rather than a guaranteed market value for an ordinary example. The real treasure is learning how to identify what makes a particular coin special. And perhaps the biggest mistake you can make is assuming that a coin has to look spectacular to be valuable. Some important varieties are subtle. Some errors are tiny. Some differences can be seen only under magnification. A collector may spend hours examining an area that an ordinary person would never notice. That patience can be the difference between passing over something interesting and discovering a coin worth further investigation. So if you have 1985 pennies at home, here's the mindset you should use. Don't search for a magic number first. Search for differences. Check the date. Check the mint mark. Examine the lettering. Study the portrait. Look at the reverse. Check the surfaces. Look for unusual doubling, cracks, clips, off-center characteristics, or other features that appear to have originated during production. Then compare what you see with trusted references. And if something seems genuinely unusual, don't clean it and don't alter it. Preserve it exactly as you found it. That could be the smartest decision you make. Because the true value of a rare coin isn't created by a dramatic internet headline. It's created by scarcity, authenticity, condition, demand, and evidence. And that brings us to the most exciting part of today's search. The 1985 Lincoln penny has shown us why a coin can be fascinating even when millions were produced, but we are still not at the end of our journey. There is another Lincoln penny coming up, and this one takes us back into another chapter of American history. I'm deliberately not revealing its value yet, because I want you to focus on the clues first. Think about everything we've discussed: condition, mint marks, errors, varieties, preservation, and authentication. Those clues are going to matter again. In fact, when you see the final coin, you may realize that the most important thing in your collection isn't the coin you thought was the oldest. It might be the coin with the most unusual story. So keep searching those jars, albums, boxes, drawers, and old collections. But search intelligently. Don't believe every $1,000,000 claim. Don't polish old coins. Don't confuse damage with errors. And never assume that a coin is worthless simply because it looks ordinary. The 1985 Lincoln penny proves that ordinary appearance can hide an extraordinary investigation. And now, as we prepare to move toward our final coin, remember one thing: the next penny is not here simply because of its date. It is here because the story behind the coin is what makes collectors pay attention. The clues may be small, the differences may be subtle, and the evidence may require patience, but that's exactly what makes this hobby so thrilling. You could be one careful inspection away from discovering something you've overlooked for years. And when we reach the final Lincoln penny on our list, I want you to ask yourself one question: if somebody handed you that coin today, would you recognize what makes it special? Because after everything we've uncovered so far, the final discovery is where this journey reaches its biggest moment yet. Next, 1976 Lincoln penny. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret, and if you have ever tossed a Lincoln cent into a jar without looking closely, this is the moment to pay attention. A 1976 penny can look completely ordinary at first glance, but the story behind this coin takes us into America's bicentennial era, a time when the country was celebrating 200 years of independence and the mint was producing enormous quantities of coins for everyday Americans. Today, we're exploring the sensational possibility of a 1976 Lincoln penny being associated with a value as high as $28 million in an extraordinary hypothetical scenario. But let me make one thing absolutely clear before we go any further: that figure should not be treated as a confirmed auction record for a normal 1976 Lincoln cent. The real value of a specific coin depends on its authenticity, condition, rarity, variety, error characteristics, provenance, and actual market evidence. And that's exactly what makes this final coin so fascinating, because the question isn't simply, is a 1976 penny worth millions? The real question is, what would have to be different about one tiny penny for collectors to take it seriously? Now think about that for a second, because by the end of this story, you may never look at an old Lincoln cent quite the same way again. The year 1976 was unlike almost any other year in modern American history. The United States was celebrating its bicentennial, marking 2 centuries since the Declaration of Independence, and the entire country was surrounded by symbols of American history, patriotism, and celebration. Flags were everywhere, special events were being organized, commemorative coins were being produced, and ordinary pocket change suddenly became part of a much bigger national story. Yet while collectors often focus on the famous bicentennial quarter, half dollar, and dollar designs, the humble Lincoln penny continued with the familiar Lincoln Memorial reverse. That makes the 1976 Lincoln cent particularly interesting from a historical perspective. It wasn't a special bicentennial design, but it was produced during one of the most memorable years in American coinage. Look at the coin and you see Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, the date 1976 beneath him, liberty to the left, and in God we trust above. Turn it over and the Lincoln Memorial appears, with United States of America above it and 1 cent below. To a casual observer, nothing seems extraordinary. But that's exactly where the treasure hunt begins. Because when you're searching for valuable coins, you shouldn't start by asking whether the date sounds old. You should ask whether the specific coin in front of you is unusual. And 1976 provides several reasons to look carefully. First, consider the mint mark. Depending on the issue, a collector may encounter Philadelphia examples without a mint mark, Denver examples carrying AD, and proof coins from San Francisco carrying an S. That tiny letter can help identify the coin's origin and the production context behind it. Now imagine you have 3 1976 pennies sitting next to one another. The first is heavily circulated. Lincoln's hair is worn, the fields are scratched, and the color has changed over decades. The second is cleaner, with sharper details and fewer marks. The third appears almost untouched, with strong original surfaces and attractive color. Are they all worth the same? Absolutely not necessarily. Condition can have an enormous impact, especially at the highest levels of preservation. For copper Lincoln cents, collectors may also care about whether the coin retains original red color. A high-grade red example can be much more desirable than a heavily circulated brown piece, particularly when the coin also has a recognized variety or unusual characteristic. But here's the critical warning: never clean the coin. If you discover an old 1976 cent with beautiful original surfaces, don't polish it. Don't rub it with a cloth. Don't put it in a chemical solution. Don't try to make it shine. A coin's original surface can be extremely important, and artificial cleaning can permanently damage it. Instead, preserve the coin exactly as you found it. This is one of the easiest ways a beginner can accidentally destroy the collector appeal of a potentially interesting coin. Now let's enter the world of minting errors, because this is where the story becomes much more exciting. Coins are manufactured at extraordinary speed, using enormous mechanical pressure and precision equipment. Dies strike planchets to create the designs we recognize as coins. When something goes wrong during this process, unusual pieces can sometimes escape into circulation or into collections. A coin might be struck off-center, have a clipped planchet, show a die crack, exhibit certain forms of doubling, or display another production-related anomaly. But not every strange-looking penny is valuable. This distinction is crucial. A coin can become damaged after leaving the mint and still look unusual. A scratch might create the appearance of an extra line. A dent might distort a letter. Chemical exposure might change the color. Machine doubling can sometimes be mistaken for a more significant double die variety. Therefore, if you think your 1976 Lincoln penny has an error, don't jump immediately to a $1,000,000 conclusion. First, document the coin. Photograph both sides in good lighting. Use a magnifier if necessary. Compare the suspected feature with reliable references. And if the feature appears genuinely unusual, seek professional authentication. The more extraordinary the claim, the stronger the evidence should be. Now imagine a completely different kind of discovery. Picture an old family collection, perhaps stored in a basement cabinet for decades. The owner has passed away, and the family begins sorting through boxes. There are old photographs, stamps, receipts, and several jars of coins. One jar contains hundreds of Lincoln cents. Most are ignored. Then someone notices the date 1976 on a coin that looks unusually sharp. They separate it from the others. Another person notices something unusual around the lettering. A magnifying glass appears. The coin is rotated under the light. Suddenly, the room becomes quiet. Is it a mint-made characteristic? Is it damage? Is it just a trick of the light? Nobody knows yet. But that moment, the moment when an ordinary coin becomes a mystery, is what makes numismatics so addictive. Collectors aren't simply hunting money. They're hunting answers. They want to know what happened to the coin, where it came from, how it was made, how many similar pieces exist, and whether other collectors recognize the same characteristic. That is why research is such a huge part of coin collecting. The story behind a coin can be just as important as its physical appearance. Now consider the historical context of 1976. The country was celebrating its bicentennial, but the United States was also dealing with economic challenges, changing consumer prices, and a rapidly evolving industrial environment. Copper prices were important to the production of cents, and discussions about coin composition and manufacturing costs were becoming increasingly significant. The 1970s were a period of experimentation and debate within American coinage. The famous aluminum cent experiments of the 1970s demonstrate how seriously officials were considering alternatives to traditional copper-based compositions. While the ordinary 1976 Lincoln cent should not be confused with experimental pieces, this broader history makes the era fascinating. The penny was no longer just a trivial object. It was part of a national conversation about manufacturing, economics, and the future of everyday money. And that's something you can actually feel when you hold one of these coins. You're holding an object produced during America's bicentennial year, a year when people across the nation were thinking about the country's past and future. Imagine a 1976 penny sitting in someone's pocket while they watched fireworks celebrating 200 years of American independence. Imagine that same coin being placed into a cash register, then handed to another customer, then dropped into a jar, and eventually forgotten. Decades later, somebody finds it and wonders whether it has a story. That's the beauty of old coins. They travel through history quietly. Now let's talk about the sensational $28 million figure. If you see that number associated with a 1976 Lincoln penny, don't assume it represents a normal market price. There is no reason to believe that an ordinary 1976 cent is worth anything remotely close to that amount. Extraordinary values require extraordinary evidence. A genuine multi-million-dollar valuation would need to be supported by an extremely rare characteristic, unquestionable authenticity, exceptional condition, extraordinary provenance, and actual collector demand, ideally supported by credible auction or private sale documentation. Without that evidence, a huge number is simply a claim. This is an important lesson because rare coin content online often mixes genuine numismatic information with exaggerated headlines. The responsible collector learns to enjoy the excitement while still checking the facts. And honestly, the truth can be even more fascinating than the hype. You don't need every penny to be worth millions to make the hobby exciting. Finding a legitimate error, a scarce variety, or an unusually high-grade example can be thrilling on its own. The hunt itself is the adventure. Think about how many 1976 pennies are sitting in old collections right now. Some are in jars. Some are in coin albums. Some are buried in drawers. Some are mixed with foreign coins. Some may have been forgotten for decades. Most will be ordinary. That's okay. You aren't searching because every coin is valuable. You're searching because you don't know which one might be different. That's the mindset that separates a collector from someone simply looking at pocket change. You examine. You compare. You learn. You become more careful. And over time, your eyes begin to notice things they once ignored. A slightly unusual edge. A different-looking letter. A strange doubling effect. A missing portion of design. A dramatic off-center strike. An unexpected planchet characteristic. A remarkable level of preservation. Each clue can lead somewhere. But each clue must also be tested. This is why professional grading and authentication can be so important. When a coin is potentially valuable, opinions from experienced collectors are useful, but formal certification can provide an additional level of confidence. A reputable grading service can authenticate the coin, assign a grade, and in some cases attribute recognized varieties. That information can help establish what you're actually holding. And if the coin is truly exceptional, documentation becomes part of its story. Imagine the difference between saying, "I have a rare 1976 penny," and saying, "I have a professionally authenticated example with a documented variety, exceptional grade, and recognized auction history." Those are completely different claims. The second one can be investigated and compared with evidence. The first is simply a belief. So if you ever discover a 1976 penny that seems extraordinary, slow down. Don't sell it to the first person who makes a dramatic offer. Don't post your full personal information online. Don't clean it. Don't alter it. Get clear photographs. Research the characteristics. Consult reputable numismatic professionals. And keep records of where the coin came from if you know its history. Provenance can sometimes become surprisingly important. Now, there's another fascinating element, the psychology of collecting. Why would somebody pay far more for one penny than another? Because rarity creates competition. If hundreds of thousands of identical coins exist, collectors can usually find one. But if only a handful of examples share a rare combination of variety, grade, color, error, and provenance, the situation changes. Collectors may compete for the opportunity to own one of the finest known examples. That's when prices can rise dramatically. The coin itself hasn't changed. The supply is simply limited, and demand is concentrated among people who deeply value that specific characteristic. This principle applies throughout numismatics. A coin's denomination tells you how much it was worth when it was issued. It does not tell you what collectors may value it at decades later. A 1-cent coin can become a significant collectible if enough rarity and demand come together. That's why the phrase, "just a penny," can sometimes be misleading. The denomination is tiny. The story can be enormous. And the 1976 Lincoln cent gives us one of the best examples of why context matters. It belongs to an important American year. It carries the Lincoln Memorial design that defined generations of pocket change. It can exist in different mint-produced forms. It can be found in different grades and colors. And, like many mass-produced coins, individual examples can exhibit unusual characteristics that deserve investigation. But remember the central lesson: not every unusual-looking feature is an error, not every old coin is rare, and not every internet valuation is real. The best collectors combine excitement with skepticism. They love the possibility of discovery, but they demand evidence before believing extraordinary claims. And that's exactly the attitude you should take with your own collection. So now, imagine yourself holding a 1976 Lincoln penny. Maybe it came from your grandfather. Maybe it was sitting in a jar. Maybe you received it as change yesterday. Would you spend it without looking? Or would you turn it over and examine it carefully? Would you check the mint mark? Would you inspect Lincoln's portrait? Would you look at the lettering? Would you compare the coin under magnification? That simple decision, to look, is where every treasure hunt begins. And perhaps that's the biggest message from this entire journey. The real excitement isn't knowing that every old penny is valuable. The excitement comes from knowing that some coins are different, and that those differences can be hiding in plain sight. We started with the 1974 Lincoln penny, moved through the fascinating possibilities surrounding the 1985 cent, and now we've reached the 1976 Lincoln penny, a coin connected to one of the most memorable years in American history. Each one reminds us that coins are more than money. They're pieces of history, artifacts of technology, records of economic change, and sometimes puzzles waiting to be solved. So if you have old Lincoln cents at home, don't automatically throw them into a spending pile. Take a few minutes to inspect them. Learn the mint marks. Learn the difference between wear and an actual mint-made feature. Learn about grading. Learn why original surfaces matter. And most importantly, learn how to verify extraordinary claims. Because the difference between a fantasy valuation and a genuine collectible can come down to one thing: evidence. And if one day you find a coin that genuinely appears unusual, that's when the real adventure begins. Maybe it turns out to be nothing. That's part of collecting. Maybe it turns out to be an interesting variety. Maybe it becomes a coin worth keeping. And in the rarest circumstances, perhaps you uncover something truly remarkable. The possibility is what keeps collectors searching. So before you empty that old jar, before you spend that forgotten penny, before you decide that a coin is worthless simply because it looks ordinary, stop and look again. You never know what story is waiting underneath decades of dust, circulation, and neglect. The 1976 Lincoln penny may have a face value of just 1 cent, but its historical story is worth far more than the number stamped on it. And that's the real treasure. Not the promise of an unrealistic fortune, but the chance to discover something that millions of other people overlooked. Because sometimes the smallest objects carry the biggest stories. And sometimes, all it takes is one careful person, one old coin, and one moment of curiosity to begin an unforgettable discovery. So keep searching, keep learning, keep your expectations realistic, and never stop looking closely, because the next rare coin story you hear might inspire you to check the very pennies sitting in your own home right now. And if you've watched all the way to this point, you already understand the most important rule of coin collecting: the value isn't always obvious at first glance. The date is only the beginning. The mint mark is only a clue. The condition is only part of the story. The error, variety, history, authentication, and market demand all matter. That's what turns coin collecting from a simple hobby into a treasure hunt. So the next time a little copper-colored Lincoln cent lands in your hand, don't just ask, "How much is this penny worth?" Ask something much better, "What am I looking at?" Because that question could lead you to history, knowledge, and perhaps one of the most fascinating discoveries you've ever made. And that is where our journey with the 1976 Lincoln penny comes to an end, but the hunt itself never really ends. Somewhere out there, another old coin is waiting, another unusual detail is hiding, another collector is examining a coin under a magnifying glass, and another ordinary-looking penny is waiting for someone curious enough to notice that it isn't quite as ordinary as it seems.